My name's Ilan. I'm a program director and also a senior advisor for technology to market here at ARPA-E. I'm going to have a quick introduction before the real introduction to this session. We've had for a couple years now a technology to market effort at ARPA-E, and basically, as Cheryl mentioned this morning, what we focus on is thinking about sort of life after ARPA-E and how do we, right, if we're just developing technology without the context of the markets and the context of where the technology is going to go after the ARPA-E funding runs out, right, we aren't creating sustainable solutions and we aren't making the impact that we want. So in the context of thinking about how we help position our ARPA-E projects and the ecosystem of technology innovation to be successful in being sustainable after some technology funding, we're trying to support, all of our projects. We have a team at ARPA-E, a technology to market team, that helps support those transitions. But basically, we're a very small organization, and we've got a lot of projects that we fund, and we've got a much bigger community in the ecosystem generally. So the question for us and the big issue we faced was, how do we leverage and who do we leverage to help support our projects, because we clearly can't provide the support for a project-by-project basis. And basically what we have found is that the regional communities and the regional resources that exist in those communities are by far the best way to help these projects succeed because of the geographic proximity, because regionally the resources in any project's area understand the local resources, can link them to potential partners, to potential funding sources, et cetera. Huge resource. And so the question we asked was, how can we actually leverage that? So before we start this panel, I'm just going to mention a project that we undertook at ARPA-E. My colleague Varun Mehra, who's in the audience, actually has been leading this. And the idea was, we tried to figure out, well, what are the different regional resources in different parts of the country? And so we did a Google search and we realized, well, you basically have to do a lot of searching to find anything in any given area. And we wanted to try and help that. So what we created is what we call our regional resource map. You can find this through the ARPA-E website. And basically the idea is we are trying to pinpoint resources across the country in different areas. You see the categories at the bottom, helping you find funding or financing, general tech to market resources, resources on IP, manufacturing and supply chain, trying to map the university courses that can help university projects. These are MBA students and others that are helping. And basically what this looks like, if you click, you can filter by state or by area, and what we have is ARPA-E is not endorsing any of these resources. What we have is a way for practitioners in the field who are working, and entrepreneurs and technologists, to basically give us recommendations for resources that they've used, and they're actually making the recommendations. So this is the Action Incubator Network, and it basically shows a contact for the organization, who was recommended by, and what that recommender said about why this organization is valuable. So we just wanted to highlight this briefly before we start the panel here, just to show how committed we are and how important we see this idea of local support for these projects, and to give you a sense that this resource exists. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the real moderator, Miles O'Brien from PBS, and we really appreciate you being here to help run the panel.
Thank you very much, Ilan. It's good to be here. We have a really impressive panel here, and we have a very short period of time, so I won't talk too long. This is a group of people that has a tremendous level of expertise in the private sector and are now in the nonprofit world. And I can relate to the nonprofit world. I'm a freelance journalist. The problem is I intend to make profits, but that's another story entirely. Tip O'Neill once famously said, all politics is local, and maybe in this case all green technology is local. These are the folks that are where the electric-driven rubber meets the road. I'm not going to read bios. They're all there in your program and Googleable and everything else. But I'd rather save the time for questions and for the comments here. But we have Amy Francetic, we have Brian Steele, Bill Hagstrand, and Fred Walti, excuse me, and representing the Midwest and the left coast. The East Coast not here. I guess they're afraid that some sort of war would erupt or something, East Coast, West Coast thing or something like that. So anyway, they're going to tell us a little bit about why it's important that These entities exist at the regional and local level to incubate ideas that might be pre-angel or pre-Kickstarter or just need a little nurturing along. They're going to tell us what works, and we're going to talk about what some of the challenges are and how folks in this room and at this conference might be able to avail themselves of services like this to try to get some good ideas to market. Without further ado, let's go ladies first, and we'll begin with just a few minutes from each of them. We'll begin with Amy.
Thank you, Miles, and thank you, Varun and Ilan and everyone for having us here today. We're pleased to be here. Clean Energy Trust is in Chicago. We are a technology accelerator that works across the Midwest, and we are funded originally by a group of high net worth investors in Chicago with the purpose of trying to accelerate clean energy innovation across the region and with a specialization in the commercialization of R&D. We have funding from the U.S. Department of Energy EERE. We have an Innovation Ecosystem Grant as well as a University Student Challenge Grant. We run a business contest every year where we award funds to these businesses. We provide mentorship, and we also do some advocacy. 3 of our portfolio companies in the past year have been ARPA-E awardees, AGVT that makes electric motors, and Numat Technologies, which has natural gas storage technology, and then also Dioxide Materials, which is a spin-out from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. We are also partners with Argonne National Lab and the rest of the J. Caesar team on the $120 million Battery Hub Award that was announced at the end of last year. And in that capacity, our role is to commercialize the technologies that will hopefully be invented as part of that effort across the distributed network of research partners.
Oh, let me just interrupt too, just before you get going here. We are accepting questions. We'll take questions all throughout. If you have a question, send us a tweet. We are at poll space ask 3. Don't ask me, I don't know. At poll space ask 3. And hashtag for all this is EIS 2013. Take it away. Sorry to interrupt.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Steele, and I'm on the faculty at UC Berkeley, and I co-direct a program there called Cleantech to Market. Cleantech to Market is a very unique interdisciplinary graduate program that was created 5 years ago, actually in the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And what the program does is take actual technologies that are still in the lab and perform in-depth technology and market assessments. The problem that we're trying to solve is that very few of the technologies that are being worked on in the lab ever see the light of day. And so we're trying to help find pathways to market for these early stage clean technologies. And so we have a program in which every year we take between 8 and 12 technologies from both the university and the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and perform about 1,000 hours per technology of in-depth technology and market assessment to attempt to figure out what is this, what is the magic that this is likely to perform, what are the initial target markets, what are the potential business models, competition, etc. Unlike some of the things, for example, that Amy mentioned, we are not, very specifically not a business plan competition. We are not an angel organization. We're not providing funding. What we are doing, again, is identifying pathways to market so that for most of the projects, the most likely outcome is some sort of research refinement, saying this needs to be back in the lab for another 2 or 3 years to replace the catalyst in this organometallic framework structure, or whatever it may be. Next most likely is a licensing target, figuring out what incumbent strategic corporation might want to license the technology. And in about 1 out of 10 cases, a company is founded. So that's Cleantech to Market, and look forward to talking to you more about it.
Bill?
Great, thank you. Certainly thanks to ARPA-E for the opportunity to be here today. What I'd like to do initially in the couple minutes that I have is just tell you a little bit about NorTech. It may not be an organization or a name that's familiar to a lot of you, so that's kind of what I'd like to do is give you a little introduction. NorTech is a nonprofit, technically based economic development organization. Our focus area is the 21 counties that make up Northeast Ohio. That's about a quarter of the geography of the state, but it represents more than 40% of the gross state product. Our focus is in the development and the acceleration of innovative clusters. These are groups of dissimilar organizations that are brought together to develop a particular technology in the area. NorTech is about 10 years old. The organization began through ideas from local business leaders that there was a need for an organization to help development in the area. And today we are still supported by that same group of business leaders. We feel that the clusters, the type of thing that we work on, are an important pillar of economic development in our area, and we think around the country as well. We use these clusters to develop opportunities and develop innovations in advanced energy. We've been somewhat successful over the last few years in doing this. Our efforts, in particular with the people with whom we deal in the advanced energy area, since 2010 have created just under 500 new jobs in the Northeast Ohio area, and we've been able to attract about $42 million in investment into the area. Participation with NorTech is very simple. We are a non-fee-based opportunity. All we ask of the people whom we serve and deal with is that they take a little time every 3 or 4 months and tell us how they're doing. That's kind of our scorecard, the job creation issue and investment in the area.
Fred?
Hello, I'm Fred Walti. About 4 years ago, the mayor of Los Angeles envisioned that LA would grow out of its economic challenges by becoming a large green economy and an important clean tech innovation center. So out of that came 2 organizations of which I run, both of which are nonprofits. The first is Cleantech Los Angeles, which is a partnership of the important institutions in LA. The purpose of Cleantech LA is to really coordinate, advocate, convene, promote the region of Los Angeles. The second organization, which is the one I think we're going to focus on this afternoon, is the Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator. It is, as its name implies, it's an incubator. It's an accelerating commercialization. It's a unique organization as much it was founded by the city of Los Angeles. We got our initial funding by the city, but yet we are a non-profit organization run by a bunch of entrepreneurs. So hopefully and theoretically, it combines the best of both worlds. We have the connections to the resources and the talent of the local governments, along with, we act pretty much like a startup in terms of our running. We're very new. We're 17 months old. We have 14 portfolio companies within our group. We essentially provide plug-and-play space, more tough love than any of our companies really want, and connections to people that can help them. So I look forward to talking to you.
All right. So again, feel free to chime in with the at poll space ask 7 at a time. I've got a little iPad here for that. Amy, let's start back with you. Try to give us, if you can give us a little case study of a success story. How does it work in a little more granular terms?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of our favorite case studies is NewMat Technologies, which won last year's 2012 University Student Challenge. And this was a team out of Northwestern that was formed of 4 people, a research scientist, his PhD student, and 2 JD MBA students out of Northwestern's Kellogg JD MBA program. And the group actually formed in response to our contest. So they knew the criteria for our contest, which was to support very early stage technologies, and there had to be a certain makeup of students on the team. And they entered our contest, and we actually worked with them to help them prepare their application, to help them be successful at competing, and they ended up winning $110,000 from us. And then they proceeded to go to the Rice Business Competition and win over $700,000, and then they competed at the National DOE competition and won the national competition. and have just been on a terrific ride since then. So they rounded up over $1 million in less than a year, which was their seed capital to begin their company. And the two JD MBA students are finishing up their degree, and they're hiring people now. They spend a little time in our office in downtown Chicago, but they're going to be locating in an incubator in Evanston, which is near the university, and they're raising a $2 million additional round right now to keep developing the technology. So that to us is a great success because they're hiring people, the technology has been licensed out of Northwestern, and they're working on their first set of products currently.
And they all go like that, right?
Every single one of them, without a hitch. Well, we wish that they all went like that, but we have, we support companies across the Midwest, and we're actually really strong partners with NorTech, with Bill's team, and they have done a terrific job of running a state-level contest in Ohio, and then they give their winners from their event to us to promote in the region, who will compete on April 4th at our Clean Energy Challenge in Chicago. And I will say that I think we are encouraged at the success of just in 2 years running this contest. These finalists, in essence, are our portfolio companies. We've awarded about $400,000, and in 2 years, those companies have gone on to raise $28 million in private and public money. So we feel like the need was pent up in the Midwest, and bringing some organization and some capital and some mentorship to this effort has really helped to mobilize some success stories, and we feel like with the amount of R&D going into the labs and universities in the Midwest that we'll hopefully see a lot more new METs coming out down the line.
All right, Brian, I want you to share with us a success story as well, and while you're doing that, we have a question from the audience I'd like you to kind of bake into your answer. What are your metrics for success? How do you define it? I mean, what Amy just described, everybody can agree that's a resounding success, but how do you know what's a hit?
Okay, the second question is actually more difficult because at the core we are two things. We are an academic program for graduate students both at the Haas School of Business and throughout the UC Berkeley environment. We have a lot of PhD students in the program as well. So we measure success on their experiences in the program, and as I'm sure many of you are, we get student evaluations and are heavily graded on how we've done in that regard. And secondly, we look at the companies. And because the outcomes can be quite varied, there is no one single metric. So let me give you a couple of kind of micro case studies to give you a sense of what I mean. So a couple of years ago, we had a thermoelectric an electrochromic windows project in the course. And the students figured out that the initial target the scientists were going after, the big commercial market, was inappropriate for an initial target market. And they refocused them on a much more premium, smaller market, the greenhouse market. And with that, they ended up getting seed funding from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. A second example, printable flexible batteries. The researcher brought the technology into the program. One of the MBA students working on the program decided that this was a great thing. They co-founded a company. It's now Imprint Energy, doing printable flexible batteries. They're off in their own office space, independently funded in Alameda, California, a short distance away from Berkeley. But it sometimes goes the other way. So carbon capture and sequestration, great technology. It was doing a great job of capturing and sequestering carbon. The trouble is when the students looked at it more broadly, and they looked at the value chain of manufacturing, it turned out that it was actually a net positive contributor to the carbon ecosystem. So the science...
And you were able to inform them of that?
So we informed the scientists. It was a tough conversation.
I bet.
But if you've been working on something for many years, you better know now that it's actually not going to do what you thought it was going to do.
So they just said, never mind, and walked away.
They refocused. They refocused. And speaking of refocusing, I bumped into one of the CEOs from one of the companies that we helped form. They're doing a thermoelectric project this morning. We helped him answer a question. He was trying to figure out, do I focus on cost or efficiency? And the students came back and really emphasized he ought to focus on cost. And they're off to the races, and he's here today.
Well, you know what they say, free advice, you get what you pay for here. You guys are giving, is it the best advice possible that if I came to you with a new, perpetual motion machine and you give me the best advice there is?
Part of the 1,000 hours that each project gets, we have a 1,000-person Berkeley Energy Network where we have a heavily curated database of 1,000 subject matter experts that we steer the students to based on their... So, for example, this past semester we had a lithium sulfur battery, working on a new anode technology. So we're able to go find scientists and professionals that are very expert in that particular phase of electrical storage.
I think Boeing wants some of those right now. Question for Brian from the audience. Are there analogs to what you do in the government labs?
Well, again, we're heavily partnered with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, so we're just now today receiving our first submissions for this year's technologies. I think 2/3 of them are coming out of Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, so that's not a partnership. I'm not sure what is. We are talking to others about expanding this program to other national lab university combinations and trying to document what we've done as a starter kit. So I think it is readily leverageable beyond Berkeley.
All right, Bill, give us a success story from Northeast Ohio.
All right. One that we enjoy talking about, and one that's a great success example in Northeast Ohio, is a company called RES Polyflow. What they do is they take end-of-life, non-recyclable plastics or general polymers, and they turn it into a very usable, we like to use the word synthetic crude oil. They do this through a process of thermal depolymerization. To give you a little idea specifically about how it works, they are able to take approximately 15 to 20,000 tons a year of waste polymer and plastic, and they can turn it into approximately 90,000 barrels of a very usable, as I said, synthetic crude oil that can be further processed at a refinery into gasoline, into diesel fuel, or can be used as the crude stream in a variety of petrochemical processing capabilities. The important success factor here is that over the last year, Polyflow now has completed all of their preliminary work, and they are completing construction of the first full-scale unit. It will be operational in Lake County, that's a little east of Cleveland and right on the lake. This unit will be operational here in about the next week to 10 days. It will create, when in fully operational, it'll create 28 new jobs in the area. Part of the success that moved them from commercial idea, pilot scale to real reality was roughly a $2 million investment into the area to let them build the equipment and actually get started. We think this is a great example of success in the area, not only because it's a new business with jobs and investment into the area, but it has a real significant environmental focus in turning a waste product into energy. If you think for a moment how much oil is consumed in the production of plastics or polymers in general, and you think about the amount that ends up in landfill, this is an opportunity to totally reconstitute, if you will, something that has essentially value only for landfill. In Northeast Ohio, we've got a little room in landfills, but if you think across the country where landfill space is pretty tight, this is a significant opportunity to make a usable material out of somebody else's waste.
I'd like to come shoot a story there. That sounds like a good one. Maybe I have to set me up.
We'd be glad to have you.
I bet you would. Yeah. Okay, Fred, what's going on in L.A.?
Well, now I'm going to be embarrassed. I mean, we in our companies are a work in progress. We're a very young organization. We're 17 months old. All of our companies are between the garage and Series A, which means they're just now getting in the marketplace. They're just now doing their prototyping. And but even within that context, we help our companies every day. We help them. One of our companies has just been acquired. Another one has just gotten funding. We help them get customers within the public sector. We connect them with folks like in this room to help them go after grants. We connect them with the universities within the area. So it's a work in progress. They're all young. We're a new organization, but I can tell you pretty clearly what our metrics are. We understand that we are an economic development play for Los Angeles. We want to create companies. Why? Because companies are the best way of creating jobs. So ultimately, our metrics are all about creating jobs. We have to create about 1,700 direct and indirect jobs in Los Angeles the next 4 years within our organization. Ultimately, I think whether we're successful or not will be judged by whether we in fact create an ecosystem that nurtures clean tech innovation and builds a big economy in LA over a period of time.
All right, here's a good question for everybody on the panel. Let make it a jump ball. How do these this from the audience? How do these organizations think about the services they provide to companies versus the homework they expect the company staff to undertake so they own their own strategies? In other words, how much do you lead them through the process? How much do you let them do give them enough rope kind of thing? Who wants to take that? You want to do it? Amy, go ahead.
Probably the case in all of our organizations is the fact that if the group is not very coachable, then there is not that much we can do with them. So, you know, if
this sounds like a good reality show, actually.
And you can find that out pretty quickly. And I think that we, you know, like Brian, we have a wonderful network of advisors who we will match up with the companies. And if that is not a very productive experience, then that's an important lesson for us not to more deeply engage with them or to necessarily give them funding, because then I think that it will be harder for them to be successful and to really seek the kind of input that's necessary across the whole development chain. But I think that we really do require them to own a lot of the effort, and while we can bring, you know, students and advisors and our staff to the task, we don't own these companies. So I mean, if they're not motivated to make these changes, they won't be that successful even once they have gotten some money, because they should be as motivated, more motivated than the investors. They would have a stake in this business, and so we need to see that kind of connection to reality and honestly listening to the feedback from the market. You know, the example that Brian mentioned about needing to redirect, we see that all the time, and since we are sitting outside the labs and universities, we see that as a really important part of our function, which is to bring market feedback very early into this process. And we hope that our group is more objective because we are not embedded in the DNA of the university or the lab, so we should be able to be a little bit more objective and cite very specifically the feedback from the market.
Anybody else have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, just to sort of move a little bit up the value chain, we're not dealing with companies, we're dealing with scientists. We're dealing with principal investigators in a lab environment. And it's amazing how much pure science, when I say amazing from a business person's perspective, how much pure science is being done. And quite often their engagement with our Clean Tech to Market program is really the first time there's been a sustained commercial thought as part of their research. And so we're looking for a scientist who is eager to engage with this process and able to provide the right sort of technological input, because quite often we find that there's some sort of refinement that's necessary for the technology to take advantage of the best market opportunities. And so very similarly, we want people that are good listeners, but in this case it's not a company and a team per se, it's generally a scientist and his or her postdoctoral fellows and so on who are pursuing these early stage technologies.
So what's more common, a great idea with a bunch of mediocre entrepreneurs or a group of really good entrepreneurs with a lousy idea? Great ideas come, so it's more about nurturing along the entrepreneurial spirit, is that it?
Well, yeah, and I wouldn't say lousy from a maybe couldn't be developed into a great entrepreneur, but I would say probably not yet. Their skills haven't been fully developed as an entrepreneur. So what often happens in our case is where there's a good technology that has great potential is that the team needs to be augmented pretty severely, and that's always one of the first concerns of the investors, is to get a great CEO with market expertise. You know, the scientist is not usually the CEO in this case. They may begin being the CEO, but then they usually evolve very quickly into being more of a technical advisor or on the board. And so helping through that transition is really important. But oftentimes I'd say we see a lot of great technologies that you know, finding the right team and developing those skill sets and getting a good blend of, you know, engineers and scientists and business people on the team is really critical in the early stages.
All right, we have a question from the audience. I'll direct it at Bill, but anybody can take this. Is your analysis proprietary to you or the stakeholder for whom it is developed? That gets into some gray areas, doesn't it? Who owns the intellectual property that you jointly create, I guess?
Well, certainly it belongs to the company. We try to work equally with a variety of folks in the same sector. Just to go back to what I mentioned a moment ago, I mentioned RAS Polyflow. We have another company in the area that has a very similar technology, and we're very effective at working with both because we help them understand that this is a big opportunity. Even though each of them has their own intellectual property, it's not something that we necessarily develop for them. We provide more coaching and assistance in the business area, really, than getting into the intellectual property pieces of their particular business. And there are situations where we will enter into a non-disclosure agreement with a company with whom we're working. We do that if there are pieces of their business or their technology that maybe by understanding that a little bit more, we could be a little bit more effective in helping them build their business. But for the most part, everything, from an intellectual property perspective, it belongs to the company.
Here's another question which I'll throw out to the panel from the audience. Is it possible for companies based in other regions to access your programs? I noticed you all talked about jobs, so I'm gathering maybe not. Go ahead. Take it on the end, Fred.
We have a resident and a non-resident program. The difference, obviously, is somebody actually sitting in our physical incubator in downtown Los Angeles, and the others are not. And they take advantage of all of our services, and they tend to take advantage of that by coming to us once a week for our studies with them, as well as all of our events. So it's both, because our region is fairly large. You know, it's LA. It's like 4,000 square miles. You know.
But if I give you a call from Washington, you're going to say
not.
You probably should.
Having said that, I mean, we have a company from China, we have a company from Canada, we have a company from San Diego. You know, so if you want to do business in LA, we're the guy.
Something's got to. You got to have some boots on the ground. In other words, right? All right. Amy, do you have the same philosophy?
Well, I just wanted to. I have one way that they could plug in. We probably work across the largest geographic area of the four of us, and I'd say it is hand-to-hand combat. So it's very hard to support with the skill sets that we have someone that's very far away that we couldn't, see at least, or talk to easily in the same time zone, or arrange meetings across our network, which is primarily rooted in the region that we cover. So I think outside the region would be harder to deliver the same quality of service. But the one thing I wanted to mention is we have a database of companies. When we began Clean Energy Trust, we really wanted to understand how many companies existed in the region in Cleantech, and we could find no good inventory of these companies. So we created the Clean Energy Exchange, and anyone can go online to the cleanenergyexchange.org and create a profile to be counted. And because we're part of the DOE's innovation ecosystem, we were able to populate that with some companies across the whole United States, and then also find partnerships for some of these companies outside of the region. And that's maybe one of the advantages of working with the DOE, whose mission is clearly national, is to try to stitch together the benefits of these regional efforts across the nation.
Anybody else on the regional component? Go ahead, Bill.
I'll add one piece. One of the tools or techniques that we use, and it's been very successful for us, we call it a road mapping process, a road mapping technique. I'm sure everyone is familiar with business planning and business plans, and certainly this on the surface can sound like a business plan. But what's unique about it is that we really try to focus on a development based on strengths that exist within our region. If we look at Northeast Ohio, possibly Ohio in general, what advantages does Ohio bring to this particular developing industry that maybe sets an opportunity in Northeast Ohio apart from other regions of the country, other areas of the world for that matter? That particular process then develops a vision for the area, a vision using these strengths and the opportunity to build these clusters, these innovative clusters. The techniques that we use, the process that we go through, we make that available. If there are other regions, other areas of the country, of the state, for example, that see what we've done, we're happy to help them understand the technique. We're happy to share as much as we can about why this has worked in Ohio and why we think it might work as a positive technique for other areas of the country.
A couple words here about the sustainability of your organizations. How hard is it for you guys to get funding? The question from the crowd is funding for regional programs, their long-term sustainability. What are your successes and challenges in obtaining help from the private sector? You want to take that?
I think we're probably all a little bit unique. We get some of our funding from the university as part of being an academic program, but we're also heavily sponsored by a wide array of corporations, from large strategics like Dow and Siemens, PG&E, who are interested in having an early look at what clean technologies are coming down the pipe, but also a wide array of venture capital firms, and other people who are interested in both the technology as well as, frankly, the people. It's a great way to get a look at some of the next generation of energy leaders as they're poised to enter the workforce.
So if you're a Dow, what's in it for them? Do they get first crack at commercializing some of these ideas in theory?
They really get a front row seat. So a chap named Steve Hahn, who's their West Coast Technology Scout, is part of our advisory group. And so Steve will be participating in the technology evaluation process, getting an early look at all the technologies that were submitted, not just the ones we pick. And then he'll come and he'll be a guest speaker to the course, and he'll get a chance to go up to the lab and work with the scientists who are associated. And so throughout the entire process, it's a real front row seat. And then when we're done and we have 50, 60-page market reports for these, he will receive copies of those as well. So it's quite a wide array of benefits that someone like a Dow is receiving.
And the other panelists, I know you have a little different model. Go ahead, Amy. Why don't you talk about yours?
We have funding from a very diverse set of sources. We have no state or city funding, so we don't have the same economic development mission in the state of Illinois, but we have a broad set of corporate sponsors as well, and we are applying for grants constantly. One unique thing that we're trying to create, we're raising money for what we're calling a proof of concept fund to just accelerate the amount of funding that we get to these organizations, and to date the funding to the companies has been in the form of a grant because it is funded by the U.S. Department of Energy. But in the future, it will be in the form of a convertible note, and the hope is that over time, we're clearly not a venture firm. We're not trying to pay out venture returns, but the hope is that over time the companies can repay some of the money that goes out, and we can recycle that in an evergreen fund that we can use to fundraise into continually, and then over time have a renewable source of funding for these businesses.
So is it easy getting this money?
No. No, we're constantly fundraising, and we have, I think, for this year's event, the most sponsors we've ever had for our third-year event, and I think it's over 30 or 35, but we raised that in $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 chunks. So the largest single source of funding we have is from the U.S. Department of Energy, EERE, which was $1 million grant spread over 3 years. But we're constantly fundraising small chunks of money, and even the proof of concept fund will be a $10 million fund, so it's still a relatively small pool of funds.
Bill, Fred, do you want to go?
I can offer a little bit there. The majority of the funding for NorTech comes from private philanthropic organizations that see the value in developing energy-related issues in Northeast Ohio. And in these advanced energy and specialty areas, they contribute to the development that we do. We do get some money periodically, not periodically, it's not a good word. We get money from the federal government, but it comes in terms of very specific projects. It's a one-time operation to do something very specific. For example, we have a program right now that comes out of Washington. It's funded by the EDA and by the Small Business Administration, and it's letting us develop programs that we call a speed to market accelerator. It's a series of activities that we can do to help small developing companies move more quickly to commercialization. For example, there may be a piece that they're missing, a manufacturing piece, a scale-up concept that they're missing. We're able to work with sister organizations in the area that have skills beyond what NorTech may have from a manufacturing perspective, from a supply chain perspective. We can build these capabilities together and help a company move more rapidly to commercialization. That's something, that's a program that's been very successful that we got funded through the federal government. But as I said at the outset, the majority of our funding is private philanthropic organizations.
Fred, go ahead.
It's interesting. All of our organizations kind of reflect where we are. And I think you got to talk about funding, at least from our perspective, in two buckets: operations and capital expenditures. On the operating side, we're funded partially through local government, partially through industry, and partially through our operating income. We have a physical presence, so that's we intend to be break even on an operating basis in about 18 months, and it's really dependent upon how many companies we get in and industry partners. On the capital front, we're in the process of building a permanent campus, and it's about, roughly speaking, a $40 million project, and we have 10 different sources of funding for that $40 million. I mean, so it's obviously a lot of it's public, but it's local, lots of different sources of local, and it's state, and it's federal, and it's private, and it's donations. The strategy is all of the above, I think, is the right way to.
So I understand why you would want to do this on the local level. Regional makes a lot of sense when you're trying to incubate these ideas at a very early stage. To what extent, though, do you view yourselves as, are you all competitors? Do you coordinate with each other? And looking at it nationally, should there be a concern that there might be some overlap and a lack of coordination, which might ultimately be counterproductive?
We're partners with Nortecs,
Yes,
so we do a lot of partnering in the region, and I think we will occasionally compete with some folks in our region, say on something that is regionally derivative for a federal grant. But I think for the most part, it's very complementary, and we're part of an organization called Advanced Energy Economy, which was funded and founded by Tom Steyer, and it's been wonderful to link up with groups like ours across the country because we're sharing a lot of information about best practices, tackling a lot of the same issues. How are things funded? How are we, leveraging the mentors in the region? What are some of the intellectual property challenges of commercializing the science? I mean, these issues are relatively similar from location to location, so to work with teams that have strengths and weaknesses different from ours has been tremendously beneficial. So I think for the most part, there's a lot to be gained by stitching together a strong network of these regional entities, to really kind of bring the best that we can into the region, but to work with each other just so that we can keep learning from each other.
Any other thoughts on that? Go ahead.
I think this stuff is so hard, and it's so much dependent on people and the execution that people are capable of. In a lot of ways, there's an inherent locality to it, and you can reach out and say, boy, do you know anybody that's got money in Chicago? We could sure use some more money, or is there somebody who knows about this technology in LA, and reach out for ideas. But ultimately, much of the critical mass of the activities that's going to result in success are a combination of things that occur in a locality. And so we work very hard to make sure that the scientists stay in touch with the companies that are using their technologies, and that there's an incubator in the downtown Berkeley area where they can move to, and from there's another place to go. And so there's a lot of sort of wing walking them from the lab out into the daylight and then through this process, and that's a very local, personal set of engagements.
All right,
I think
we're
it's
in
really
bonus. Go ahead, Fred.
I think it's really competitive. I think that we share best practices in a lot of ways, but when it comes for funding on a national basis, funds go to different regions, and we compete for those funds. We compete for talent. We compete for capital. We share best practices as best we can, but I think it's a very competitive marketplace, and I think that's good, and I don't think there's a lot of overlap between regions because commercialization takes place on a regional basis. So I don't think, in that respect, I don't think there's overlap, but there is competition.
So you really don't like these people at all?
Oh, I love them.
Oh, okay. All right. All right, so we are in bonus, but this is a good question. I just want to, maybe we could answer it kind of in a succinct way. Who are, in your minds, the leading thinkers on commercializing technologies? Steve Blank, local entrepreneurs, academics? Is there an easy answer to that one?
I mean, Steve Blank literally wrote the book, so it's hard to argue.
All right, take him off the list.
What he's doing. So, I mean, he's
entrepreneurs or academics, if you had to choose between those two groups.
In commercializing?
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
Yeah,
by definition almost.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think just, kind of we don't have many Googles in the clean tech space in our region. Okay, so we don't, the sort of path that the Google guys went from taking the technology out of Stanford and then, building the business. So I think those kind of repeat entrepreneurs are the best examples. We have one very successful repeat entrepreneur who's done a lot of heavy science commercialization named Andrew Perlman at Great Point Energy in Chicago, and he has a coal gasification technology in his latest company that he created and developed in partnership with Gas Technology Institute in Chicago, and then recently did a $1.2 billion financing with Wan Sheng, and he's very engaged. So Michael Polsky, who's on our board, is on his third company right now, Invenergy. It's the single largest independently owned clean energy developer in the country. This is his third company, and they just did a $500 million financing for some of their wind farms. So the more we can engage those repeat entrepreneurs in the process, the more successful and fertile the whole ecosystem is.
Anybody else? All right.
I would add that
one more.
I think the entrepreneurs generally are more successful at converting ideas into business, but certainly there's a strong university relationship. In the greater Cleveland area, we're blessed with a pretty strong university system. We've got lots of talent on that educational university level, and there have been several ideas that have come out of the universities, but I think the value has been that they have separated them from the university and let them develop as a business, as an idea. We can cite several examples in our area that have worked very effectively, and I think through the ecosystem of economic development that exists in our area, I think a lot of the universities see the opportunity to spin out some of these technologies and some of these ideas and let them have an opportunity to develop on their own. So I think both are true, but I think more times it comes from the entrepreneurial idea.
All right, we're out of time. Thank you, panelists. Amy, Brian, Bill, and Fred, and they'll be here, obviously, if you have any further questions. Give them a round of applause. Thank you for your attention.